Hello and welcome to this week's lesson on Mr. Vermeer's class. We're continuing our study of God's promises. And so far, just to review, we've talked a bit about Adam. God created Adam and Eve, and he told them, if you and your descendants will be my people, then I will be your God. And Adam's descendants messed up. So God sent a flood to destroy all the evil people in the world, which was everybody except for Noah and his family. And then after the flood, God told Noah, if you and your descendants will be my people, then I will be your God. And then Noah's descendants messed up, and people became evil again. So God called Abraham, who was faithful, and separated him from the evil people, and told Abraham, if you and your descendants will be my people, then I will be your God. And Abraham and his descendants messed up. And leading up to where we are now then, after several generations, God has led the people of Israel to Egypt, where they were taken as slaves. And they remained in Egypt for 400 years. And now God has raised up another leader, a Hebrew who was raised among the Egyptians and was versed in the Egyptian culture and knows, all the Egyptian customs in court, and knew Pharaoh personally. And he's called him to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. And we'll see here that he's going to give, in today's lesson, he's going to give this same thing to them. If you and your people will be my people, then I will be your God. So let's talk about this great leader, Moshe, or Moses as we call him, considered the greatest among all of the Jewish religion. The Jewish people revere Moses. Not quite as much, I guess, as we revere Christ. They don't worship Moses, but they do consider him to be probably the greatest leader that Israel has had. So Moses has led the Israelites out of Egypt, out of their slavery, after God performed many miracles among Pharaoh and among the Egyptians. He sent 10 plagues to the Egyptians, the last one resulting in the death of all the Egyptian firstborn. And Pharaoh suddenly then drove the Israelites out of Egypt. They went to the Red Sea. Pharaoh thought he had them trapped, so he went to try to go catch them and bring them back. God opened up the Red Sea, parted the Red Sea. The Israelites were able to walk through. The Egyptians tried to follow them through. God sent the sea back and killed the Egyptian army. And now Moses is leading the Israelites down toward Mount Sinai. And we'll see why here in just a minute. Let's pick this up at Exodus chapter 19, verses 1 to 4. It says, in the 3rd month, from the very day the Israelites left the land of Egypt, they came to the Sinai wilderness. They traveled from Rephidim, came to the Sinai wilderness, and camped in the wilderness. Israel camped there in front of the mountain. Moses went up the mountain to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain. This is what you must say to the house of Jacob, and explain to the Israelites. You had seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I carried you on eagle's wings, and brought you to myself. So, it's been 3 months now since they left Egypt. They've been going through the Sinai desert, the Sinai Peninsula, and they have now camped in the desert right in front of Mount Sinai. Now, this is important because this is a fulfillment of a promise God made to Moses in Exodus 3:12. Where when God first called to Moses, Moses went to see the burning bush. He was on Mount Sinai when that happened. And God told Moses that one of the signs that you are to be my leader is that when you have led them out of Egypt, you will worship me on this mountain. So that's why Moses has brought them down to this mountain. So they're all camped out in front of it, and Moses goes up the mountain. God calls Moses and says, you come up here, I'm going to talk to you, and you're going to tell the people what I've said. Now, this whole thing is brought about, and I've said this, several times before, people just aren't satisfied. God has said through all these generations, ever since the creation, all God has said is, if you will be my people, then I will be your God. Well, Israel has gotten to the point now where they're saying, okay, we want to be your people, but tell us how. What is it that we have to do to be your people? Give us step-by-step directions. What they're really saying is, we want to know what we can still get away with. What is the bare minimum that we have to do to still be God's people? What is the bare minimum that I have to do to get to heaven? That's the attitude that a lot of people tend to have in today's world. People talk about how, I think I'm pretty sure I'm going to heaven because I'm a good person. Well, how good do you have to be to get into heaven? Just ask them that sometime. If they think that they're going to heaven because they've been good, how good do you have to be? Because God is about to give them 613 commands. And say, fine, if you want step-by-step directions, here they are. Follow all 613 of these laws. And the people will soon find out that they can't do that. Not because it's physically impossible, it's just highly improbable that anyone is going to be able to keep all 613 of those laws through their entire lives. That's why God sent Jesus. Because we can't be good. That's what separates Christianity from every other religion in the world. In every other religion, you attain heaven or nirvana or whatever it is, whatever the ultimate goal is. You attain it by being good and following directions. Does God really care if you pray 6 times a day? How many days maybe are you allowed to miss praying 6 times a day and still get to heaven? What if you can't pray 6 times a day for this reason or for this reason? Just how lenient is God going to be? See, that's the whole thing. Christ tells us, I know you can't keep the law. I know you can't do the things that God wants you to do. I know you're not physically able to, so I am going to take your punishment in your place. And all we have to do is accept that sacrifice. And that's how we get to heaven. God is talking to Moses here. He calls Moses up the mountain, and he starts his covenant with a history. This is the way that most ancient Near Eastern covenants started. The two parties would go over their history with each other. And God starts off by saying, no, you have seen what I did to the Egyptians. It's also kind of a way of saying, okay, look, I'm God. I told you that you were going to go to Pharaoh. You were going to ask him to let the people go. He wasn't going to. You were going to do these miracles for him. Finally, he would drive you out, and you would come and you would worship me on this mountain. Now, all that has happened. So God is saying, look, I have done everything that I told you I was going to do. I have lived up to my end of the bargain. So now here is your end. He's about to give the Israelites their side of the deal. If you want to be my people, here's what you need to do. Let's continue on and look at verses 5 and 6. God continues on and says, now if you will carefully listen to me and keep my covenant, You will be my own possession out of all the peoples, although the whole earth is mine, and you will be my kingdom of priests and my holy nation. These are the words that you are to say to the Israelites. So again, all God is saying is, if you will be my people, then I will be your God. I want to take care of you. I want to treat you special. I want to give you blessings. But in return, you have to acknowledge me. It's like a person who just gives and gives and gives, but never receives any thanks or even acknowledgement that the person has been giving. This is the way God is feeling. And, God has the right to do whatever he wants. Okay, God does not need our worship. God does not need our thanks. God is simply trying to tell us, look, you should be grateful for the things that I'm doing. I'm the one who is taking care of you. Can't you at least just allow me to? So he says, listen to me, keep my covenant. If you do this, you will be my own possession out of all the peoples, although the whole earth is mine. So, what about those people who say, well, why is Israel so special? Aren't we all God's children? Well, God is acknowledging that. God's saying, yes, everyone is my child. I created every person on the earth. I created everything on the earth. The whole earth belongs to me. But I have chosen the nation of Israel to be my special people. And what does he mean by being his special people? He says, you will be my kingdom of priests and my holy nation. And what's a priest? A priest is the go-between. A priest is the one who goes between God and man. The priest is the one who carries man's petitions, carries man's needs to God, and then gives God's messages, to the men. So what God is saying is, I want the nation of Israel to be the ones who will talk about me to the whole world. The whole world has turned away from me again, is what he's saying. Even after Adam, after Noah, after Abraham, the whole world has still turned away from me. I want you to be the one to talk about me to the whole world and to try to bring the world back to me. So, if you will keep my laws that I'm about to give you, if you will do the things that I ask, if you will acknowledge that I am the one who's been blessing you, then you will be my special people, and you will be the ones who will carry my word to the whole world. And even more important, you'll be my holy nation. You will be the one through whom I am finally going to send the Messiah, the one who is going to save the world. That's why Israel is God's chosen people, because they were chosen to be the nation through whom God would send the Messiah. The Messiah had to come through somebody. He had to be descended. He had to be descended from someone. God chose Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and that line to be the ones through whom the Messiah would come. And that's why he's saying, you're going to be my holy nation. You're going to be my special people. You're going to be the people that, if everything goes according to plan, you're going to be the ones through whom the world is going to be saved. You're going to be the ones that will allow the whole world to get to heaven if they choose to accept my Messiah, who is going to come through you. That's a great blessing that God has given the nation of Israel. And of course, we see from history, they even rejected that. The Messiah came through the nation of Israel, and Israel had the distinction of being the first nation to reject him. Until finally, in the book of Acts, we see Paul saying, fine, I'm going to the Gentiles. If the Jews won't listen, then I'm going to the Gentiles. And that's why the Gentile nations are the ones now through whom Christianity has spread. But don't worry, the tribulation is coming in which God is going to deal with the Jews again. They're going to restart their sacrifices. They're going to reopen their temple. And God is going to say, since you didn't accept my Messiah, we're going to go back to the old way. So the Jews haven't left his mind. God has not completely rejected the Jews. They are still God's chosen people. That's why we need to still support the nation of Israel. Let's finish up looking at verses 7 and 8. It said, after Moses came back, he summoned the elders of the people and set before them all these words that the Lord had commanded him. Then all the people responded together, we will do all that the Lord has spoken. So Moses brought the people's words back to the Lord. Moses comes down the mountain and he tells the leaders of the tribes, here's what God said. God said, I'm going to give you these rules. I'm going to give you these laws. And the people all responded, we will do everything that God has said. How long is that going to last? God, if you read on, is going to speak the 10 Commandments out loud to everybody. A lot of people don't realize this. God will then speak the 10 Commandments out loud to the whole nation of Israel. Everyone is going to hear those. Number 1, don't have any gods other than me. Don't make any idols. You know the whole list of the 10 Commandments. He's then going to call Moses to come back up the mountain to receive the rest of the law. Moses is going to be gone for just over a month. Within that month, so no more than a couple of weeks, most likely, did the people keep their word about we will do everything that God says. Because before that month is up, they make an idol. They start offering sacrifices to it. They start worshiping it. And probably commit all kinds of debauchery and other things that go along with it. They break basically every one of the commandments that they've heard. You can't say, they didn't know what the law was because Moses hadn't come down yet. They knew the 10 Commandments. But they're going to break them all within just a couple of weeks after hearing God speak them himself. People say today, why doesn't God just come down here and speak to us himself? It wouldn't matter if he did. He came down to the Israelites. He told them the 10 Commandments right there in front of them. They saw the cloud around the mountain. They heard God's voice speak from the cloud. And within a couple of weeks, they've already broken all commandments. And they're ready to go back to Egypt again. Whenever somebody comes to me and says, why doesn't God just come down here himself? I tell them he did. And we crucified him. What more can God do? He gave us his word. He gave us his son. All he asks is that we accept it. But we are so hard-hearted. You hear all these people saying that they don't believe in God. What they really mean is, I don't want to believe in God. because I want to live my life the way I want to live it. And I don't want anyone telling me what I can and can't do. And I don't want anyone telling me that I'm wrong for doing certain things or for thinking certain things. I don't want to be accountable to anybody else for my actions. That's why people don't believe in God. Not because they can't, but because they won't. We see it repeated throughout the whole Bible. The entire Old Testament is a repetition of this pattern. Israel hears the word of God. They turn to God and say, okay, we'll do everything you say. And then as time goes by, they turn away from God. God raises, they usually end up in trouble. They end up being conquered, or something happens to them, really bad. God raises up a faithful leader. He saves them. They turn back to God. And then some more time passes and they turn away from God again. This is the whole story of the Old Testament. But within that story, we see that God is preparing this nation of Israel to receive the Messiah. Because sprinkled out through this whole story, God is giving them little prophecies, little hints. Here's what the Messiah is going to be like when he comes. Here's what he's going to do. So that when he comes, you'll recognize him. You'll know it's him. And then he came, and he didn't do things the way they thought it ought to be done. So they rejected him. And people are still that same way. People still have this attitude, I can't believe in God because God, I don't think God would do this. I don't think God would allow all these hungry people in the world. I don't think God would send these tornadoes to destroy these cities. I don't think God would send these earthquakes to kill all these people. What you're saying is, I've got God right here. This is what I think God is like. And if anything doesn't fit that, then I'm not going to believe it. God is God. It's not up to us to tell God what he should be like. God tells us what he is like. And we either accept it or reject it. God wants us to accept it. And that's all it takes. Accept God for who he is. Accept Jesus for who he is and for what he did. Next week is Independence Day here in the United States. We're going to have a special lesson about praying. So please share these videos. The more you like, the more you share, the more these videos show up in other people's suggestion box. So I'll see you again next week.